All right. Welcome to another show of the James Spearman Show. I want to thank every one of our listeners as we've been building this podcast and growing our presence online. It's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of great people that we've interviewed over time. And this next podcast with our host is incredible. And we're interviewing Rob Reider today. And he has such a unique story. I'm very proud to have him on my show. And just to give you a few of the facts from Rob, I'm going to let him introduce himself. But just to give you an idea of Rob's background, he's a 5-time Emmy Award-winning broadcaster. He's a pilot and one of the most recognized airshow announcers in the U.S. with decades of experience in television and aviation. Rob brings a unique blend of storytelling, performance, and technical knowledge to everything he does. Rob, I've grown up going to air shows, and I've heard your voice for a very long time, and I'm extremely proud to have you here. You're one of the reasons that I'm in aviation.
Wow, thanks, James. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you for saying such nice things.
Well, again, thank you. And right where I'd like to start is we all know that you've got an amazing story, but where did it start, Rob? Normally, people in aviation, there's this one moment where it clicked and you're like, I love airplanes. Mm-hmm. And you just, from there, you're just hooked. It kind of consumes you. And I know personally, for my moment, was when my dad took me to an air show that you were at when I was very young. What was that moment that set you in the aviation career, or just like sparked that interest?
James, it's a little circuitous. I will say that my dad, after World War II, soloed in a Piper Cub, but because he was colorblind, he couldn't get a private pilot's license. But he had me building models. We built models together and cared about aviation, and it was always a fun thing, and we were talking about planes all the time. And but I also had music in the family. And my mom had been a singer in New York in the late 1930s. As a matter of fact, she actually was voted Society's #1 songstress in New York in 1939. And she dated Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president's son, several times, had a date with John Kennedy, of all people. And but the music, for a while, kind of overtook aviation, and I wound up working on television in the Midwest, and the show was called The Bob Braun Show. It was a live, 5-day-a-week, 90-minute talk variety program. We had an 8-piece band, and I was one of the singers on the show, and we did everything from John Denver to show tunes to Earth, Wind, and Fire, and some of my stuff from the 80s was 70 to 83, but some of my stuff is still on YouTube to be seen. So you can find me playing guitar and singing. But when I was on the show, the Thunderbirds came to Cincinnati, and an anchorman, the news anchorman from another station, got a flight with the Thunderbirds, a media flight. And I thought, heck, I'm on a show that's on in 4 cities, not just one. And I reached out to the Thunderbirds and worked out that I got a flight in a T-38. And I said to my wife after that flight, after I had gotten sick, after I got out of the jet, but I said, I got to get my private pilot's license. And so I did. And a good friend of mine, my best friend in my life, we've known each other for 53 years, I think. His name is Jim Fiorito, and he was a pilot, and he taught me basically how to fly, so that when I started my instruction, I soloed in 4.5 hours, got my private in 43.5 hours, and then started working on my instrument and had to stop because of family things. And we had 5 kids, and money was not there to do it. And finally, later on, I did get an instrument rating. In 1987, when Sporty's Pilot Shops started their video department, the guy who ran the department at the time, Lou Sims, who was from Chattanooga, started asking around town, is there a pilot you know of who can read? And somebody mentioned my name. He called me up. I went out. I did a screen test for him, and we went to work. And that, I've been with Sporty's ever since then. Well, the the interest in aviation continued, but I got to back up now to 1978 when the TV show I was on, the Bob Braun Show, took our show on a remote telecast to what was then the Dayton Airfair. It was the 5th year of the Dayton show. And I was asked if I would be interested in volunteering because in addition to everything else, I was a ham radio operator. And at that time, they needed the ham radio operators to go along and shadow the officials from the air show because you their rental radios didn't exist in those days like they do now, or family service radios. So we ham radio operators were the ones who provided the communications. I started doing that, and I just lived for that 4 or 5 days being up at Dayton. Then I got asked to announce the balloon launches at 6:30 in the morning. And I decided then after a while to start hanging around the announcer's stand a little bit. And a guy named Bill Bordelot, who was ICAS member number 4, ICAS member number 4, let me come in and do some of the local commercials and things like that. And one day he said, I got to go to a briefing. Here, do these manufacturers' demos. And he handed me a bunch of paper, and that was it. That was my baptism by fire. And I loved it. And that eventually grew to the point that I continued to volunteer at Dayton throughout the 80s and into the 90s. I joined the International Council of Air Shows in 1995 because some people at Dayton thought I could do the announcing thing. Bill Bordelot helped me there. In 1999, then, the president of ICAS, John Cudahy, who had taken the Sporties video course that I hosted, asked me to MC the banquet. And that put me in front of the entire population of the air show industry. And that was one of the 2 most important things that happened. The other was that Sean D. Tucker saw in me some raw talent and said to the people, one on either coast, to the folks in New York at Jones Beach, after the first year they had that show, you should hire Rob Reider to announce the show. And he told Harry Wardwell in California, in Salinas, that he should hire me. And so between John Cudahy and Sean D. Tucker, things then grew from there. And in 2006, after working for the previous 9 years at a church in Cincinnati, doing video directing and lighting direction, I decided to step away from that job and go after air shows full time. That was 2006. Took me all the way through getting the sort of excellence in 2007, and then retiring at the end of last season. I'm going too long here. At the end of last season, 2024, retiring and being inducted into the Air Show's Hall of Fame in December at our convention just a few months ago. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
No, that you're not going too long. No, that's awesome. It's a really unique story, and I the air shows I wanted to ask you about, anyways, but I'll get there here in a second. But how old were you when you decided, or when you got your private pilot's license?
Let's see, it was 1982. I would have been 34.
That's awesome. It's
yeah.
I like to bring that point because many of my customers, I own an aircraft maintenance facility, and I help, normally someone that is successful starts to have enough resources to where they're wanting to buy back some of their time in the form of aircraft, either just to save them time or they just think it's fun. They get that spark, right? So, or they get hooked in some way. And many of my customers, they've got a family, they're running a business, or they're some sort of executive somewhere. And how do you find the time to get your pilot's license? For me, I was kind of fortunate because I did it when I started flying when I was 15. And so
that's cool.
When I finished my pilot's license as fast as I possibly could. However, I had, nothing but time, right? I put that point in because it's never too late to start, and many people finish their ratings normally in their 30s or in their 40s or 50s. So it's doable. And I think that's really cool that you were juggling a bunch of things, but you were able to find the time to finish your pilot's license. It is doable.
Yeah, and I rented planes and had an opportunity to help a guy keep some hours on his older Cessna 182 for a number of years. And I flew that occasionally to air shows, but it was a 126 knot airplane is what I filed at. And I couldn't always trust the glide slope on the ILS. So I didn't fly it a lot. But when he sold the airplane, I decided at that point that my flying days were over until Ken Reeder and the late John Thacker from Redline Airshows said, "Why don't you get an RV?" I said, "Yeah, but it only holds 2 people." He said, "Well, how often do you put more than 2 people in the airplane?"
Good point.
Not very often. I said, "It only carries 100 pounds of bags." They said, "Pack small, pack soft, pack light." Okay. And then John started looking, and he found this airplane that in September of 2016, I got an RV-7A. It came from Scottsdale, Arizona, and he put the panel in it. And so it's all Garmin glass, dual G3X touch, and a 650 GFC 500 autopilot, second radio, a remote transponder, and the 245 stereo audio panel, and an extra G5, and then I carry that and a Sentry and an iPad, and I'll go any place in that. I've flown it to Yuma 3 times, twice solo, once with my son, who at the age of, he's going on 50, my oldest son is, he's going to be starting his instruction in a couple of weeks. And when he was younger, when I was flying and I had a Grumman Tiger or other airplanes to fly, the kids could fly with me, but it was like, straight and level, just keep her straight and level. And one day I picked him up in Ocean City, Maryland, to bring him back from a vacation early. It was an excuse for me to fly out there 3 or 4 hours and fly back with him. And on the way back, he's flying the airplane, and we were VFR on top, and there was it was scattered to broken when we were getting close to Cincinnati. And I said, "You see that hole down there to the right?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "We got to get down there, take it." All of a sudden, he's really flying the airplane. And the bug bit him. So he's been through the Sporties video course, and he starts his instruction here in a couple of weeks, and I'm thrilled for him.
Yep, that's how it normally starts. And then all of a sudden it hooks you, and then you're watching every Sporties video you can find on YouTube. Immediately start looking for an aircraft to buy as normally.
Oh, boy.
But it's really cool because, there's only the statistic that I've heard is, there's only 1% of our population that are pilots. And the number of those that own aircraft actually is probably, I don't know that statistic, but it's probably a very small portion of that 1% as well. And so normally you can't just like ask your brother or your neighbor, "Hey, how do you buy an airplane?" Right? And so there is great resources out there, but many people, if you don't know about the AOPA or other organizations that can put you in the right direction in contact with someone, you have no clue how to buy an aircraft, what the process looks like, what's a pre-buy, what's an annual inspection, and then how do you get insurance for the thing, and then how do you pay the sales tax on it, all this stuff that you kind of have to find someone to mentor you and get you through that process. Because it's a big learning curve, and it's not very similar to purchasing a car. I assume, luckily, you had a lot of experience around the industry already before you started to buy an aircraft. But were you able to find a mentor to help you through the process of, okay, this is what it looks like to buy an aircraft. These are the steps that you should do.
Oh, yeah. And that was John Thacker. John, sadly, as part of Redline, was killed in a night show in Culpeper, Virginia, back a few years ago, and 2018 actually, and that was really sad. But when we had the discussion about why not an RV, he started looking, and he found and looked at several planes, one in Cincinnati, which did not work out, another, two others around, one in Texas, and then he saw this one in Scottsdale. And he said, let's take a look at that. And the owner mailed some logs and other documentation on the airplane. And he said, we got to look at that. So I put down some money to have him hold it. I used Delta frequent flyer miles for John and me to fly out there. And he had built at that point 10 RVs. So he knew them inside out. He did an inspection. He took it for a test flight, gave it 2 thumbs up. I had the rest of the money wired to the owner while we were standing there in Scottsdale. And we left at about 1 o'clock that afternoon and stayed in Albuquerque overnight, and then flew back home the next day. And it went into his shop, and it went from an analog panel to the Garmin panel. And then his hangar mate, Bruce Brielmeyer, up at the Butler County Airport, where most of the RVs in the city are, Bruce gave me a 5-hour checkout. I had a complex and high performance checkout already. I'd flown Cherokee Aero, and so I had all that kind of stuff. So there was no problem with all of that. But I needed to get to know the airplane. So I got a 5-hour checkout. And then that was at the end of October. And then on October 31st, 2016, Ken Reeder of Redline, who is now flying with his son Austin in the Airshow business, Ken took me up for an IPC, signed me off, and on November 2nd, I think, 3 days later, Jill, my wife, and I got in the plane and punched up into the clouds and flew to Jacksonville, Florida for the last 2 air shows of the season of 2016. So it was, and it was really kind of a whirlwind, but I have never regretted buying that plane.
Yeah, you made a smart decision going Garmin. Just happen to be a Garmin dealer here.
Well, I see that over your shoulder, and I don't have it on here, but I do have my D2 Mach 1 watch on here, so I'm a fan of Garmin gear, and Carl Wolf out there, who runs the aviation division, has become a good friend. And so I had an interesting thing happen social media wise, James, when I put something on social media talking about my affiliation with Sporties and with Garmin and Hartzell Propeller Company. And they've been friends for decades. And some guy got on and says, well, yeah, they're giving you all that stuff. You got to say that. I said, hold it, dude. I paid for every dollar of the installation of all the Garmin gear on my airplane. They didn't give me nothing. Hartzell Propeller. I have worked with them forever, and there's a Hartzell Propeller on my airplane, but they did not give it to me. And Sporty's Pilot Shops, I've been working with them forever, and I owe them a great deal. And I will say this about Sporties. Since 1987, I have been working with those guys consistently, constantly, and we've never done anything more than a handshake, because that's how we like to do business. So and the guy backed off. He understood. He said he apologized, but I said, I'm plugging them because I like their stuff. That's oh, and David Clark headsets. I bought the David Clark headsets we have too. So I'm a DC guy, have been forever, but I love the DC-1X. But my wife and I got to try them out for a while, that Matt Youngkin, the Airshow pilot, let us use for a while. And then we bought each other DC-1Xs for Christmas from Sporties. So I'm still a fan of those headsets. So there you go.
Yeah, I fly the KC-135 for the Air Force National Guard, and at some point they transferred over, giving everyone Bose headsets. And,
sure.
I'm one of the last holdovers that have my David Clarks, and I just happen to be in Knoxville, so I actually, when I was in Air Force pilot training, I had my David Clarks. I custom painted them orange with a big UT on the front, on the sides of them.
Oh, that's funny.
So,
That's so funny. Let's hear it for the balls.
yeah, that's right. So I still use those. I kind of a lot of the old headsets still fly the jet. The active noise canceling, it kind of takes away some of those normal sounds that you're used to hearing. Like the tanker, you can kind of hear it when you're on approach speed, and when you're configured and on approach AOA, and then you kind of lose that with the active noise canceling, and it can take out some of the other like normal key things that you're used to hearing. So that it's not always great to have the active noise canceling.
Well, in my airplane, it sure is, because there's not a lot of sound deadening between the propeller and the canopy, which is right there. Yeah, I've had Clarks forever, but I have become a real fan of the ENC that's on those and the comfort of them. But what Bose started on the Voyager flight with Dick Rutan and Gina Yeager going around the world in that airplane, and with the original Bose heavyweight noise-canceling headphones, their hearing would have been permanently affected, if they had been involved or exposed to those kinds of noises, the engine noise, for that long a period of time uninterrupted. So let's hear it for what Bose did and what has helped David Clark and Lightspeed and the other companies that are doing active electronic noise cancellation. It's pretty cool stuff.
It is. The advancements that they made over time. And now, Lightspeed, as far as I know, is the only one that has, they can actually put your prescription hearing set up if you use hearing aids. So that's really neat.
Yeah, it sure is. And the technology will just continue to improve. So anyway, that's it's fun to have been associated with these companies and to still be happy to plug them as I do. Of course, in Flying Magazine, the podcast that I do for Flying Magazine, I learned about flying from that, is sponsored by Avemco. So I'm also a fan of Flying Magazine and Avemco Insurance.
That's right. Yeah, which now flying has been kind of bought and taken a whole nother direction. I mean, they are amazing. A lot of the content that they're putting out is just incredible.
Oh my gosh. Plane and Pilot and all the other things, and went back and they purchased some of the brands from Bonnier Publishing, the company that used to own Flying Magazine. So it's just it's pretty amazing what they're doing over there. So I'm proud to have the podcast and have it, having now turned more than 101 episodes out. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
What has been kind of your biggest hurdle as an aircraft owner?
I had, for several years, an issue with cylinder head temperature on the number one cylinder. And we kept working on it as best we could and couldn't seem to get it to settle down, and finally got it over to, I said to the guy who was doing my condition inspections, I said, I think we ought to get a second opinion. He said, I wouldn't stand in your way on that at all. And so I did a little experimentation, and the folks at Select Aircraft Service at Claremont County Airport, Kurt Schimpf, started looking at it, and he finally made an adjustment, took away the entire air dam that was in front of the first cylinder that was helping supposedly get some cooler air over the top of that cylinder to the cylinder behind it. And once he did that, flying became way more fun. And it was especially critical. I mean, when I was having the cylinder head temperatures go higher than I believe they should have gone, I had to nurse the airplane all the time. But once that was settled down, all phases of flight became more fun, and particularly shooting instrument approaches, when I didn't have to worry about those temperatures and the power settings that I had, I could concentrate on flying the approaches more successfully and more accurately and more safely.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, what most pilots call that is brain bites, right? Like as a computer, you've only got so many bytes available. And if you could just free up a few more brain bites so you can focus on the other things that are trying to kill you, right? So the weather, traffic, doing what air traffic control wants you to do. That's why having an autopilot is really good, especially when you're flying legitimately in IFR conditions. Being able to have the aircraft fly itself, and it frees up more brain bites so you could deal with the situation that you're flying through. So the other thing that most people don't understand, especially if you've never owned an airplane before, it's and you've described it, right? These are issues that people, cylinder head temperatures, that, like, if you've only owned a car or a boat, you have no clue. And you're like, well, why doesn't the computer just tell it to do that? And I was like, well, this doesn't have a computer, okay? It's air cooled, and and it has a mechanical fuel system and a rudimentary it has a rudimentary ignition system, and it just goes.
There is no FADEC in an RV. Correct.
And you trying to explain this and to a customer that is new to aviation, why is this breaking? Why is that? And it's like, well, it's low quantity manufacturing. And where Ford is putting out like several thousand trucks a day or a minute, probably. There's only maybe 1,000 of these engines produced in a whole year, and some years it may only be 200 or 300, and it's made by people. There's no they don't have the means to invest in equipment that does this, stamps it out every single time. So whoever did your baffle, right, like on that, that was Frankie, and maybe he had a bad day that day.
Well, it was fine, and for the first couple of years, and then it started acting up, and I don't know why, but it's all right now.
Yep. And for the most part, a lot of mechanics don't like to do troubleshooting in general. It's more of like to part off, part on. And so if you have something completely unique like that, where it takes multiple rounds of troubleshooting, it oftentimes takes persistence to kind of like, okay, let's get a new opinion, or let's find a mechanic that really just like loves to troubleshoot and try to get this resolved. So it's not as simple as just what you may be used to in your car, where, I mean, I hit the start button, and there's never a point in my mind where I'm like, we'll see if it doesn't start today. It's just, I know
we are all people of great faith when we trust all that stuff.
Yep, that's right. Well, I wanted, those are all great points for our listeners, and I want to encourage anyone that's looking to start flying. If you're start flying and own an aircraft, it's definitely doable with your schedule, and you can definitely find someone to mentor you, to help you through the process of aircraft ownership. Rob is talking about a close friend that helped him through this process, because it is, you don't want to just buy an airplane sight unseen, and you need to know about the requirements that are different than anything else you might have ran into. So I encourage you, their AOPA has great articles on the subject. Go to your local airport, find a CFI that you can build a relationship with, a maintenance shop. They've got one there, and start learning a lot of these processes. But and
there's no substituting having somebody who has the knowledge to guide you through that. And 99% of the time, I think those people are very, very happy to share their expertise to help somebody else into the family of flying.
Yep, you're exactly right. And are there some bad eggs, I suppose, in the industry? Yeah, certainly. But the overwhelming majority of people in the industry are so excited just about aviation in general. They're willing to spend so much time with you because they're still excited about airplanes. And I know that from my experience, and where, heck, people will call me out of the blue. Hey, a friend gave me your number, and I'll sit there and talk with them free of charge for 3 or 4 hours, just because I love it.
Yeah, I have transitioned out of Airshow announcing to doing voiceover work and primarily audiobook narration. And I've gotten associated with a couple of groups, one in particular that for the last year or so, and I just pulled out of that project, but helping people in the group overcome some of their technical issues so that they can get the brain bites focused on performance of the audiobook that they're doing, so they're not worried about the tech. And I've spent I've spent a lot of free hours helping out people doing that. But having had an audio company for 25 years in the past, and being a microphone freak and having pretty sensitive ears to the human voice, I've been able to help a bunch of people improve their sound and let them concentrate on performing an audiobook or performing the commercial or whatever it is to get the read right and not worry about tech.
That's incredible. I will be reaching out to you. I'm working on my own book. Aircraft Ownership 101 is kind of my goal. And so I will certainly be reaching out for your services, hopefully in the next year, over this
That'd
year.
Be great.
It's kind of, I set the goal of, I'll get this knocked out in 6 months. That was not the case.
What's interesting is that audiobook narrators have to develop a sense of patience that an author typically does not have. And there are many authors who want to do their own books who wind up only doing the foreword or a small portion of it, or not doing it at all once they get in the studio and see how tedious and slow and challenging that it can be. I'm fortunate if I turn out. My best day, I think, has been just shy of 2 hours of finished audio for a full day at work before my voice starts to get tired. Typically, I'm about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes a day of finished work. And so that I can keep working. But you're going to use, for a guy like me who's been in the voice business as long as I have, it either gets used up shouting at a crowd over the sound of jet and prop noise, or used over a more relaxing but longer number of hours talking without stopping.
So for those of us that, because I know I'm not alone, and nowadays, in 2025, as a small business owner, like it or not, social media and podcasting and potentially writing your own book are definitely part of marketing moving forward through the coming years. And so how somebody that's reaching out for your services, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
RobReider.com, RobReider.com, and it'll take you right to my page that has my audiobook samples and a contact form so I can be reached easily.
That's awesome. You have a huge opportunity.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about marketing. LinkedIn has been helpful to me, and relationships that you build with people. I just came back from the Audio Publishers Association conference just about 2-3 weeks ago, I should say. And it was in New York City, and it was tremendous. And I didn't see all the people I wanted to see, but those people that I did get to see, and glad hand, hopefully they will keep me in the front of their minds when the time comes for them to choose a narrator for a new project. So I'm out there hustling just like anybody else. After 20 some years in the airshow business, the amount of repeat business is so significant. I didn't spend a lot of time the last 10 years of my existence as an airshow announcer in marketing, because I knew who I was going to be working with every year, and I just had to confirm those things. In the airshow business, you want to get to the point where your business, your next year business is booked before the convention. So when you're at the convention, you're just glad handing and meeting new people from the show or whatever, and maybe just signing contracts. But it got that way for me, and it was very gratifying. I was such a blessed guy to have survived as long as I did in the airshow business and to go out on my own terms. I could not have asked for a better career that I never expected was going to be my life's work.
That's incredible. And I want to be respectful of your time, but I'd be doing our listeners a huge disservice not to ask you about your air show, some of your best memories from air shows. What was one that some moments that really set apart that come to your mind from all those
I'll just
times?
ring out two of them.
Okay.
One of them is an image that I saw at Dayton when I was still a volunteer at the show, or maybe just a part-time announcer there. The Golden Knights finished their performance, and they lined up on an access road right behind where the announcer's stand is. And on that access road, just after that, there's a chain link fence for the pavilion. And the Golden Knights are coming up there doing their salute, going to parade rest. And there's this little kid, inspired as could be by the Golden Knights, standing about 2/3 the height of the chain link fence, going like this, saluting the Golden Knights as they were coming, taking their applause in their lineup after the show. That was one. Having had the opportunity to fly with the Thunderbirds back in 1980, and having the opportunity to have coached the Thunderbirds narrators and the Blue Angels narrators for a long, long time, especially with the Blues. The Blue Angels, on their rehearsal day, they do what they call their circle and arrival maneuvers on Thursday when they get to town. And on the Friday practice show at Jones Beach in New York in 2010, Amy Tomlinson, Blue Angel number 8, for some reason was unable to get there to monitor the radios and tell number 7, the narrator, what was coming up next. There was a police escort foul up. Somehow she didn't get there. So I put on a scanner, put the thing in my ears, and I told number 7 that what was going to be coming next. And we joked afterwards, "You're not 8, you're 8.5. Well, Sunday, in my blue flight suit with a replica, not the real Blue Angels crest on it, I'm standing there. I introduced the Blue Angels, and then I got in between 7 and 8, mugged with a scanner on my hip with 8.5 on it. Well, they made me an honorary that year. That's one of the biggest things ever.
Wow, that is awesome.
The next day, that was at Miramar in September, and the next day, Amy Tomlinson came out to show center with a helmet bag with my name on it, the Blue Angels crest, and 8.5 embroidered on the bag. And so my call sign has been 8.5 since then. And that's another. And then there was one other. When Tyler Davies, who was a narrator and opposing solo and a lead solo, former Blue Angel, worked it out, the Blue Angels were going to be going by from someplace out west, past Oshkosh, onto another show farther east. And I didn't know that, but I was told by then the guy in charge of things, he said, Dennis Dunbar said, "I want you to sing the national anthem. I want you to start it at 2:30, and I want you to be done by 2:30, 1:30. Okay, I'll sing the national anthem." So I'm out there, and I'm standing out waiting for somebody to fly over at the end. And I'm singing, "Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave?" And I'm slowing down, and I'm looking at my watch, or the land of the free, and the home of the brave, and over flies my team, the Blue Angels. I nearly broke down. There were tears coming out of my eyes. I just couldn't believe it. And they did that for me and for the people of Oshkosh. But I know they did it for me. I was so blessed. So those are 3 of the big ones. But the awards have been nice, but I think the biggest rewards ever have come from the fact that the people who were my heroes are now my friends. And that's been attributed for a long time to Bob Carlton, but even he got that from Rob Holland. So my heroes are my friends.
That's incredible. Those are, I can feel it, right? Like anyone that's been to any of those air shows. I mean, the joke is when the Blue Angels or any of the fighter jets on display, they come by with those full afterburners, and like that's a whole lot
Home of the brave.
That's right, a whole lot of freedom right there.
Yeah, and the Blues on that one, they changed their call sign so people could not tell who it was, except for some of the geeks heard the call sign and figured it had to be the Blues because they changed their call sign from Blue Angel number 1 to Voris 46. Butch Voris being the first leader of the Blue Angels in 1946. So they called some of the guys who were listening to the scanners. I said, they got the goosebumps. I got it now. I got goosebumps now thinking about it. The Blue Angels are coming, and Ryder doesn't know.
It's awesome. If anyone out there has not seen their the performance, go to an air show. It's incredible. And you've got lots of opportunities across the U.S. and it is really cool. You can see on YouTube, like Rob was talking about it when they prep. They have this whole this whole show. I was at the helped put together the air show for our McGee Tyson Air National Guard base, and the Blue Angels came. So they walked in and you got to see them do they chair fly their whole show, and they have this extremely unique chair flying scenario that you can see on YouTube. It's really cool.
They kick back and for a certain couple of maneuvers. In the briefing, the 6 pilots, they do it typically with the 4 diamond pilots. They kick back in the chair, get down like this, and they put their arms on their legs like they're flying, and put your hands on the throttles. And number 3 will look like that. Number 2 will look like that. Number 4 will look like that. And they fly the whole thing in their minds. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Huge shout out for chair flying, but that's part of Air Force and military training is chair flying. But yeah, it is extremely unique. Go on YouTube and find that their pre-show chair flying routine. Yeah. One last question, Rob. You're probably I don't want to put you in a bad spot, but what air show performance do you have a favorite one, or can you say
no? No, I don't, because as I was saying, friends. When I think of the number of years that I was at Miramar, 17 or 18, and only 2 people in that time were the guys I reported to, 19 years at Jones Beach, more than that at Dayton, almost over 30 years, counting my volunteer years and my part-time years and my co-announcing years with Danny Clisham at Dayton. It's just the depth of the friendships is really cool. And when you think of the depth of the friendships with the performers with whom I've worked, and that's even amazing. Michael Goulian and Ryan Tierney, his crew chief, were here in my studio, sitting in this room as we worked up music for this 2025 show and narration for the 2025 show. That's all set and recorded now, and they're ready to go on the road with it. And they'll be at Key West with it here in a week or so, or a couple of weeks. And then same with Ken Reeder and his son Austin, working music with him in this room. And since they're from Cincinnati, that's even more fun. So we get together as with Austin and his fiance, and Ken and his wife Christy, and Jill and I will meet. And there's a great sushi place here that we like to go to. So anyway, that's it's the friends. It's way more than just the planes, but the planes sure are cool.
That's right. Well, Rob, you've been incredibly gracious with your time, and thank you again for so much for coming on the show and just sharing your story. Again, you were inspiring to me before you ever came on, but it's really neat to hear those stories straight from you. I hope our listeners, any of them out there that are thinking about purchasing an aircraft, do it. It's definitely doable, and I hope you enjoy this podcast. And any business owners out there that, again, we talked about it's 2025. Marketing looks like probably, in the past, it was like Bob's Auto Shop. Nobody cared who Bob was. Nowadays, now everyone cares. They want to see Bob on Instagram, turning a wrench or something. They want to read Bob's book. And so I want you to encourage you to reach out to Rob. I'll put a link to his website. If you're working on a book, and all of what he described, I didn't go deep into it, but, I've been having to go through this learning process on how to get a book ready to do an audiobook like he's describing. So I hope,
James, that folks will tune into I Learned About Flying from that. It's a highly rated aviation podcast sponsored by Flying Magazine. It's based on the most widely read column in the history of the magazine, and the magazine's 1927 is when they started. It was 1943 that I Learned About Flying from that first appeared. And Lisa DeFries was the one who put it all together for me and Avemco. And I Learned About Flying from that is stories about pilots who get into tough situations but live to tell about it. And there are some remarkable stories. And as we get new listeners on board, they'll write me and they'll say, we started at number 1 and we're binge listening all the way through. So that's kind of fun. So usually 29 to 35 minutes long, and just bite-sized enough for everybody. So I hope they'll listen to I Learned About Flying from that. I laughed. ILAFFT.
I'll be sure to put a link in this podcast as well, and these notes to make sure I do listen to your podcast as well. It is awesome, and so I'm grateful that you put that out there, and I hope the best for your podcast and it grows continually, and definitely reach out to Rob and listen to his products out there. And again, thank you for coming to our show and listening, and happy flying.
Thanks a lot, James.